Hey, I'm Tom Hades. I'm here with computer music in my studio. I'm gonna show you guys how I build a track from start to finish, really to finish, to mastering as well, or let's say pre-mastering. Maybe you know me from 20 years of being in this techno scene. I've been playing a little bit all around the world. Have my own label, Rhythm Converted, which I started together with Marco Bailey, where actually my whole career started together with. And nowadays I'm touring on my own more and more and more, and I'm not planning to stop yet because techno is really part of my life. So most of the time I always start to find some decent kick. So this means that I'm trying to figure out a way that I will get a direction of my track, which is based on the type of kick. I made a lot of kicks for my own in presets and synthesis and different ways, and I will start with one which will probably have the sound character towards I will working with in the complete track. Next to this, if you see what I did in here, is actually it's a bounce of a kick which I processed a lot using saturators, compressors, etc. And actually what I always do is I send it to a send and return and use this as a kind of sub bassline underneath. That's what you hear. So if you want, I can show you how I do this. For example, let's say we take a normal 909 kick. We do a basic pattern. Which is the most simple way of having a kick. And afterwards, what I do is I just put a lot of effects on a return track. For example, I start with an overdrive. Next to this, I will put in a convolution reverb, which is a reverb from the max thing from a live, max audio effect. It's based on convolutions, and I really like this because it has a really nice character in the different convolutions that you can find in here. Next to this, I make some kind of filter delay, and then I will finalize with a simple filter which gives me the typical techno rumble. And this rumble is very nice because it's not really a character sound, it's not a bass sound that needs to be on a specific tone or whatever, but it will give you the power of the kick underneath. So what I then do is I bounce this, just like this, then I remove the complete thing, and then I use something which is called Xfer LFO tool. It's a sidechain. You can use it for a lot of things, but I use it for a sidechain effect because for me it's an easier way to put this on instead of going through the routing of the sidechaining with compressors and stuff like this. So as you can see, it will now automatically pump all the time without any problem. And then on top of this, what I then usually do is I start to put some extra saturation or whatever, like the ones you know from sound toys, decapitators or stuff like this. most of the time I also use let's say typical EQs, which are emulations of older EQs, like the ones from UAD. Why? Because you can add some extra character, like the Pultec sounds, and because it can bring up your complete character of the bottom or mid or high sounds. So let me search those. No, it's not this one. It's a legacy one. This is my baseline. So eventually the one that I used in the beginning, which is this, is based on the same principle, but it's like a complete processed one. So let us continue on that one instead of the one that I just created. Then next what I will search is some kind of sequential syncopated melody that will bring me in some kind of direction that I want to go with, a tone or a character of a sound that is eventually will define the complete tone of the or the chord or whatever of the track. So there are plenty of ways to do this. I usually just take a synth, whatever it is. For example, let's say I just installed a new Arturia collection. So I'm really happy with some new additions they did. For example, you have the Buchla easel. It's really, really nice. Or this one, the DX7, which is a cool emulation. So next to this, I used the generators. What I did from the whole, let's say, last 10 years is I created my own sets of things which I use or reuse. These are MIDI effects, audio effects, patches, own made stuff, whatever. Why? Because it makes my life much easier, and I don't want to be going through plenty of plugins again and again, trying to find again the one that I really need. So I can have some go-to things which help me out to find quick ideas. For example, one of those things that I use is the sequential, this one. It's a plugin from the guys or company called Hi, H-I. And it's based again on the Max for Live thing. It's a 32 sequencer instead of the typical 16 sequencer. For me, it's really easy to find some quick ideas. What I always do is I make the end in a syncopated way, not like the typical 8 or 16 bar thing, 16 note thing, but really in a way that techno is known for, to find something that is a bit more and now I start to experiment just with sounds, starting to put different envelopes. For the people who know the FM synthesis, it's actually, you know, oscillators who are influencing other oscillators that it eventually will give you some kind of strange or unusual sound. So these influences, how they are going from one to another is based on this matrix here. Maybe I can put it a little bit bigger. It's just a default patch that I start from, but I'm not really looking for a patch like a typical sound. I just start to experiment with something. It can be an existing patch, it can be anything, but I try to find a way. For example, as you see, just by turning some knobs and changing some parameters, you can immediately make something of your own, you know. The reason why I really like the Arturia things is because of the added functionalities, like you can add layers from effects and stuff like this. Like if you see how many influences you can do based on the typical FM synthesis on top of this, just by using their synths, you already get something which is much more unique than, for example, FM8, for me personally. What I'm actually looking for at this moment is nothing more than like a sequence which will be running underneath and which will give this typical techno sound that is a driving, it doesn't stop, it's a sequence that keeps on going, and it will get some kind of, you know, hypnotic feel to a track. Before I put on the effects, I will first bounce one without the effects. Why do I do this? Because then I can maybe find the notes that are used, because I will be using a plugin called Scalar to find the chords or whatever the scale I'm in, because this way it makes my life again a little bit easier to find out in which scale I can continue. So what I do then is I just bounce whatever I have, and then I use the function from Ableton, which is a conversion based on audio. What it will do is it will try to find out what is the melody used in this track in audio and convert it to a MIDI track. So sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. It's basically it. So, okay, it found a melody, which is fantastic. It also put it straight away. That's what Ableton does. It does it straight away on a kind of instrument, but I'm not interested in this instrument. What I will do is I will create another MIDI channel. I will put in the MIDI clip, remove the other one, remove the audio because I'm not interested in the audio either. And then on this new MIDI, I will add a plugin called Scalar. Scalar is a really nice plugin for me because it's a really complete set of finding MIDI, finding chords, progressions, etc. Chord progressions is not something you typically think about in techno, but in the end it can bring up a character to your track. So how does this work? You put on a scalar on the MIDI track, you have for example a MIDI clip with some notes inside. You click on detect, you click on start, and you just start the MIDI clip. What it will do is it will play the notes that are inside with an internal thing, and then it will say, okay, based on this note, 5 out of 6, it's probably based on a major scale or a B minor scale. So since it's techno, I tend to use always the minor scales. I'm not into the major scales, but that is no problem with using it anyway. So, and this way now I have my own set of progressions that I can use. So next to this, I will create another MIDI, which will be my next sound. And for this one, I just go to anything that can influence me in terms of sound. So now I will really search for something that I want to have as a sound. Okay. So let's search for some kind of lead sound maybe. And then I can, using this scale plugin, I literally can drag in a progression. If it works. Okay. And this is one of the scales that can be used based on the sound that we created on the DX. So what I can do then, I can make some kind of sequence out of this. It's just something random that I will try and see what it does. So once I have this, I made my own melody, and if you can hear it, it's on the same scale as we created the random one. So that's the cool part of this. When using the scaler plugin, you can really build up, based on scales, really cool melodies. So basically what you do is you create a random pattern, and on this random pattern you have random notes, of course. Okay, that is a bass note on this, what you can choose here, which is C chromatic. But depending on the sound that you use on top of this, for example, I used the DX7, which is actually, it's due to the FM synthesis, it can really be a little bit out of tune, so it can be actually another kind of note, so another kind of scale. So what I did is I bounced this, and based on this, I will extract the melody, find out which notes are used, and then with the scale plugin, I will find the root note and the scale which corresponds to this. Or let's say additional scales, because based on this scaler, I just took in the B minor one, I think, or the D minor one, no, the B minor one I took. But as you can see, you can use even other ones, which can be used in the same way. Once you select a scale here, you get chord progressions, the typical diatonic ones, like the 3 ones, or you can have really chord variations which are much more complex, and based on this you can have like the typical hard ones, or the ones that you will do transitions with or stuff. But since it's techno again, we're not gonna make it too melodic either. We're not searching for the perfect classical melody. We're searching for something that is still in tune, or let's say at least in the same scale, and built on top of this. So once I found the scale, I will put it as a, let's say, default MIDI clip based on the scaler, and then I will search for a sound that I tend to go to for typical techno. As my choice now is the Arturia Jupiter. Why? Because yeah, Jupiter is a classic, it's a legend, and you can have the typical known techno sounds inside. What I'm looking for now is more a kind of a lead sound, because I really want to bring this up as the front sound, The one that I just created with the random sequence is more like a background sound. Why the Jupiter as well? Because, or let's say why the Arturia Jupiter as well? For the same reasons, you can put in extra layers, which you couldn't do in the really classic one. So this is a classical lead. Okay, maybe it's a little bit too simple. As you can see, the notes as well are too high, as for me. So what I tend to do now is I will make it again more like a sequence that will start to cut out more. So what I do is I just lower down the sustain, lower down the release thing, that it gets more, cut it out as a sequence. At this moment the sound maybe is still a little bit too soft or too easy to, let's say, for stuff like techno it can be a little bit more aggressive. So what you can do then is if you raise the resonance and if you start to make things a little bit more out of tune or change the waveform of the oscillators, you can make like for example this is much better. Okay, let's stick to this. For the moment, I'm using the effects from the Arturia synth itself, which you can find in the additional pages here. But it's the chorus and the delay. I'm gonna lower down the delay a little bit, because I'm not really interested in this delay, because I want to use something else what I also created over the years. I tend not to use as much the return tracks from Ableton. Why not? Because once at the end of my production stage and kind of pre-mixing stage, I bounce all the stamps and then I go to Studio One. But if you have to bounce the stamps and you send stuff to your return tracks, in the stamps there is no return embedded. So that's something that I'm missing in Ableton when exporting stuff. So that's the reason why I made for myself, using methods in Ableton itself, I made myself a send insert track. What is it? It's actually nothing more than a chain, an audio effect track with two chains. You have a dry chain and you have a plugin chain. And in the plugin chain, I already embedded an EQ which cuts out the low. So I don't have the interference immediately with delays going back to my, let's say, the place where it's really important that it's not muddy, it's the bass part. So I already cut it out from the beginning. So whatever plugin that I put after this EQ now, I can use it in the same way as a return track, but it's really embedded on the track itself. So for example, if I just put in a ping pong delay or something, it's the same effect as a return track, but at least now you have when the stem is bounced, everything is inside. And the nice thing about this is, even within this, you can use sidechain. So you're actually sidechaining your own source on your own effect. So what I do is I add a compressor, I put on the sidechain, and then I put on the same track what I started to put this send insert track. So actually the effect now is really sidechained based on its own sound. So only the rest is filled with get the effect. So on top of this, techno is known for its, let's say, tension building, atmospheric things which are underneath the track all the time and which are coming up and down using LFOs or envelopes or stuff. How do I create those things? I tend to use my own methods instead of finding a sample and using transitions. I tend to use an effect track that I also created, which is called, in my case, it's an atmospheric send rack. What is it? I just send it to a return track, and whatever sound I want to have additionally sending as kind of atmospheric thing, I can use this. So for example, I just use the Jupiter now, and since it's the same sound who's sending out, I can still stay in the same scale and note, and it will not go out of tune. If you really have to search for atmospheric tracks and you really need to fine-tune them on the same scale, sometimes it's really time-consuming, and in the end you will, either stop with it or try to find another one. And since it's only something that is there to build tension, I only do it like this, because then I can bounce it to a separate audio track and I can start looping it, and then I can put on top of this kind of envelope generators or LFOs or whatever that changes the path or the structure of the sound. So the atmospheric send rack that I built actually exists of, I will open them up, basic plugins from Ableton. You have a ping pong delay, but on a really narrow band. Why? Because I don't want to have the complete spectrum going up and down. I just want to have some kind of band that is in there. What I usually tend to get in between the 1 and 3 kilohertz. Why? Because that's where the tension of a sound can really build. It's not too high, it's not too low, it's just enough. Then I got a panning thing, an auto pan. Sometimes I change it a little bit to get a little bit more movement inside of the sound, but okay. Then we get the resonator plugin from Ableton. I really like this. In the resonator plugin you have a really bunch of nice presets. For example, the Berlin one is really nice. The Prague one is nice, and as well the Rome one. Those are my preferred ones. What are those? Those are actually nothing more than presets based on, let's say, chords or chord progressions, which are in balance or out of balance in a kind of way that it can give additional layers, harmonic layers. And then at the end, what I do is I tend to put another kind of bandpass thing, but in terms of an EQ, EQ8. And all those parameters that I want to change, I just map them to this rack. What are the parameters that I want to change? It's the frequency, the feedback of the ping pong delay, then the dry wet of the resonator. Sometimes I want to have more or less of the original sound coming through. And then the EQ8, as I said, I use it as a kind of bandpass filter. So I created 2 frequencies, and those frequencies I will be tending to go left and right. So that's basically it. So once I have this, I send my original track to this return track, and then I start to mess around with the frequency bands to find out what is the thing I want to use as a tension. Okay. And then I bounce this thing to a separate audio file, and I just start moving slowly some additional parameters that I mapped. So I already get some kind of evolving thing in the bounced audio track. The good thing about techno is you don't really need to stand in typical bars or 2 bars or 4 bars. You can really make it syncopated, and that's really nice, because that's what makes a track really interesting. So once I have this, I can remove the return track. I'm not interested anymore. Now I have the bounced audio, which is an evolving, as you can see it slowly evolving, etc. And that's the good part about this. I can use it now underneath my track with additional layers, like I said before, of filtering and LFOs. So once again, I'm going back to my set of patches that I use, and I built my own high pass low pass filter patch. What is it? Again, nothing more than 2 auto filters from Ableton, where there is one mapped as a high pass. As the moment I turn it on, it will literally turn on. Why is this good? Because otherwise you will also lose, if it's always turned on, you will always lose actually a part of your sound. So if you map things, always try to figure out if you have a 0 value that you can put it off as well on the 0 value. It's very important. So what I can do now is I can use this filter now in combination with an LFO. This LFO is again a Max for Live LFO plugin. You can find it, it's free. And you can map it on a parameter that will then slowly move in the amount that you want. So I will change the frequency to a really low one, that it will slowly evolve from low pass to high pass, etc. Okay. A thing I always try to force myself as well in the beginning of a production is not to stay too long with tracks which are not named, because in the end you can get lost in so many tracks and you're always like soloing things and I don't need this, I have this, etc. So it's not okay. So let me rename those. Okay, next what I tend to go to is now I really want to go for some kind of percussion things. First thing which comes up in my mind is of course the hi-hats. So let's go for a 909 hi-hat. The ones that are included in Ableton, in the suite anyway, are actually pretty good. They're handy to use. I just add in some additional things like saturators to give them a little bit more of character. First, what I always do, and it's something out of habit I guess, but I always use the low cut to really cut out the lows, because I don't know why they did it, but it's a sample. It's a sample based on a 909, but there is still so much rumble on this sample in the back. So for me it would be much more logical that they already opened up the low cut, but okay, whatever. It is like it is. Once I have the hi-hat, which I tend to use, which is a 909 closed, I will make just a typical 16 pattern. And I will try to bring some swing on it. which I also use within Ableton. You have the swing possibilities, and I tend to go to the swing 55-56%, which is enough for me. It's not too much, and you can easily change the amount. Okay. Lowering down the decay. Why? Because I want to play a little bit with the decay just on this, that it's slightly changing over time, or with another LFO, which I use. So I just mop it to the decay thing, and I do a small amount. Which will bring movement to my track instead of the typical too linear stuff. The one plugin that I always tend to go for adding on top of my percussion elements is the isotope trash. Why? Because I really like this the algorithm of saturation on percussion elements. Trash really has a unique sound. I made by just experimenting, I made a saturation default preset for myself, which I can use, but it's actually based on a multiband. I'm gonna lower down this volume a little bit. It's based on a multiband thing. So on the lower one, I tend to, if it's a hi-hat, I'm not using it at all. I lower down the mix. But on the mid and on the high frequencies, there are two different algorithms. The mid, I use the tape saturation that they use. It's based on an old tape emulation, but it adds some grit to the sound in the mid. And on the higher one, I use an amp. You can see it as a guitar amp, which is like bringing up the transitions a little bit more. Then, since we're in the 909 percussions, let's stay in the 909, and I'm gonna add another one, but it's the open hi-hat now. Again, I'm gonna do the low cut. I'm gonna lower down the decay because I don't want to have it too open either. And then I'm gonna, instead of bringing it to the typical in between the kicks, I'm gonna set it to a point where it's again for techno in a syncopated way more. So, which is for me much more interesting if I use this in combination with some delay effects or reverb effects. One thing I used to have in the past in hardware, but I sold it, stupid me, but I sold it, is the Roland emulation for Space Echo. I bought a new one, which is a guitar plugin, guitar pedal, sorry. It's okay, but it's not the same. But there is one that is made from Audio Thing. It's an emulation based on this Roland Echo, Space Echo, and I really like the sound of the reverb of these kind of things, because again it's based on a kind of tape thing, and it gives some additional character to your sounds. So you can hear it immediately. It's much nicer as a reverb. Once I have this, I'm gonna find a way to get some additional lower sounding percussion like toms underneath to give it even more character in the bass, because I still only have the bass from the kick. So I really want to have some additional percussion underneath. So what I will do is I will go again to the 909 kick. But this time I will take the complete kit from Ableton, because I can play around then with the toms. Okay. What I'm aiming for is actually something that I will use in the same way as I used in the beginning of the kick. I will send it to a return track with additional stuff on it, and this I will use as the bass line then. So I will just put in some notes which I can use on top of, or let's say underneath as a bass line. So I'm just looking for something very easy. Okay, it's much too loud now, but since I'm gonna use it as a bass for my send to the return and as a bass sound, I'm gonna not focus too much on the fact that it's not sounding correct in the track, and I'm not looking at the sound now. Okay. Okay, so again, what I did is I just put in the percussion, I send it to a return track, and on this return track I just made a sequence of plugins that I will be using to accentuate the sound of the toms, as the purpose to be using it as a bass line. So I'm gonna bounce it again, because it's only for this that I need it. So let's bounce this. Okay, so I just bounced the percussion as a bass line. If you want to listen to it, it's boring. But it doesn't matter, because again, it's just the thing which is underneath and will fill up the space in the bass area, and will be sidechain on top of the kick as well. So again, I'm only looking to find something that will accentuate the bass now. To really use this in a proper way, Melda Productions has a really cool plugin which is called Ambassador. What is Ambassador? I don't know if I can make it bigger. Ambassador is nothing more than a harmonic generator in the bass areas. So you have the typical bass, and then you have the sub basses. As you can see, this is your dry sound. I created much more bass now, so this is way too loud. I tend to use it in a way that it's just underneath my dry signal, that it's an additional layer, but it can bring a lot of more character in bass. So on subsystems you really hear this difference. I'm gonna put this a little bit lower because it starts to okay. Of course, now I'm gonna sidechain it again because I added some layers, so I wanna have it sidechained that the kick is not interfering, or let's say the bass is not interfering with the kick, etc. So that's enough for me. I'm not sure about this one. The moment you start adding layers like I do now is, at least for my way of working, I tend to find a way during my adding of layers that I can still find the gain staging and the balancing in a good way. So what I do is, if I tend to have the impression that something is slightly too high or not, or fighting already in frequencies, I try to find the best way to get it already a little bit balanced out, because otherwise I will keep on focusing even without wanting to focus on this, and I will lose my attention for the production stage. So for example, what I hear now is that bass and kick are not really working together as far as how I want to have it. So what I will then do is I will use again the UAD plugins, the Pultec emulations, to find the frequency that is really bothering me. I'm gonna put it on the bass now, and what I can do now is I can dip really high and start moving the ones that might be interfering. This is the one. So around 60 Hertz and 200 Hertz I want to have a dip, because those are the ones that are interfering with my kick. It immediately gives more space now, so that's what I want to have. And to give even more character to the kick, I also use a plugin called Kickbox. And what is Kickbox? It's very stupid actually, but it's based on the things where the character of a kick is really either in or could be muddy or something. So what you have is three different parameters to set. You can put them off like this. You have the warmth. What is the warmth? That's where the body of your kick is. Typical is 50, 90 or 110 Hertz. Don't see it too straight because I put on an a visualizer to see what is going on in the background, and actually it's not really 50, it's more like a low shelf curved belting. If you really, I don't know if you can hear this much in detail, but if I put it on, you immediately feel that the kick gets much more bottom. And just by flipping those switches, you can see where you can accent your kick. Okay, for me this is the 50 because it's that is where the heart of the kick apparently lies, and then you can see if you can add 3, 6 or 8 decibels. The Q factor is, like I told you, it's you can make it much more narrow or much more broad based on this, but it's already a pretty broad band, so it's still okay as being a boost. Then next to this you have the boxiness. It's a typical term that is known for kick design. So those are the ones, and you can immediately hear this. If I put it on, it gives space to the kick immediately. The ones that are the frequencies that are usually interfering are 180 Hertz to 320 and 430. So again, just by flipping, you can hear this is where, for this sound, it's better through 320. And by doing this, you just created space for your bass line to be there. And then if you want, you can add an additional click sound. It's an attack sound. Again, those are the ones from 1 kilohertz, 1.5 or 2 kilohertz, and again with 3, 6 or 8 dB boost. So I can boost them, but for me that's a bit too much now. Here it's more clear, so maybe I can keep this one. And then next to it you have a compressor as well, but I don't tend to use this compressor because I'm not really keen of this kind of compressor to do compression on kicks. What I usually use is the CLA compressor from Waves. It's a CLA 76. Why do I use this one on kicks? Because it's a really fast compressor. And that's what you need. You can see immediately it starts to bounce much more. So if we just group those two and do an A-B comparison, it's a big difference. But there is something that is really going. Okay, and now I can really raise the bass line again, because now it's not interfering anymore with the kick. Okay, so I created the low, let's say lower toms, and I made a bass sound out of it, and now I'm gonna use those as an additional layer in the more like low mid, but between 150 Hertz until 300 Hertz. Why? To give the additional attack transient thing on the bass line, since it's following the same line. So I just use this to free up some stuff. I just open up the kit and remove all the things I don't need, which is eventually those. And then I'm gonna accentuate more the ones that I really want to have, so not really the low, That's what I'm aiming for, that you have some kind of attack that is coming through. Then I'm gonna lower it a little bit in volume, but it will sound as if the bass line has some additional transients on top of this. Okay, so soloed. These are the same toms, and what I did is I just put some more, let's say, resonance on the transients that I want to do. Why? Because the bass line is built on the same structure as those percussions, but this way you get in the bass line a kind of transient question-answer system. So this will give much more character to the lower part of the sound of the track. Okay, then what else are we typically missing in a techno track? Of course, a 909 ride. So let's go back again to the 909 kits that are within Ableton, catalogue, and instead of the simpler from the classics way, I'm gonna go to the one shot, so I can have the complete ride going through, but I will sidechain it again with the Xfer LFO tool, so it's really cut it down all the time, but it has to be like a razor blade, you know. So let's put it in between the kicks. Then use the plugin for sidechaining. Okay. The only thing I really want to do always is add one additional element to accentuate the fact that there is a loop going on and is always started over again. So I tend to use either a clap or a snare or something at the end of a loop in a way that it's kind of announcing the new loop is the new start of the loop is coming. So it's basically nothing more than a MIDI clip where at the end you use a clap or something, like I will go back to the 909 clap. But instead of keeping it like always the same traditional pattern, I use the functionalities which is called duplicate loop in Ableton. It's literally duplicating this loop multiple times, and this way I can add additional elements on a more, let's say, random way, but it will make things more interesting than just keeping it always on the same pattern. Since it's also one hit amount in a, let's say, longer period of time, I always put on a kind of delay, let's say a ping pong delay, because you can fill up some spaces if you want. Okay. Then, let's say based on this I can already start to build some kind of basic arrangements. Of course I will add some more elements afterwards, but to give an idea how I build things. eventually I do it in a very simple and easy way. I just record this to the arrangement with everything on, this way. Until I have some part that I can start to drag out and I start to cut out things that I don't need. So I go to the arrangement view, I select all those parts and I just drag them out until I have something like a 6-minute or approximately 6-minute track. Okay, that's a visual problem. It's not a problem that the audio is missing, but it's a visual problem. Okay, so what I do then is I start to cut out things that I don't need in the beginning. Usually I cut out all kind of percussion elements except the low ones that are question answering with the bass line. And I tend to bring in things in a slow fading in way. Fading in, I use again a rack that I created, which I called fade away, but you can use it as a fade in as well. What is it? It's again a combination of multiple plugins from Ableton. It's a grain delay, it's an auto filter on both ways. You have a low pass and you have a high pass. They are working together in a way that you can either literally what it was intended to do, to fade things out or fade things in. After this you have a reverb, you have another EQ which is used to again get the lows out if you start to fade out more and more. It's kind of a high pass thing. Then another delay, filter delay to accentuate things more and more, like spacing out, and then a compressor to keep things together. So it's let's say it's a pretty complex rack to do something very easy, but I build it in a way that it's you can use it in any type of sound or in any arrangement. It will always do its job. So what I will do now is, on the first sequence that I made, the random sequence from the DX7 from Arturia, I will put the fade up all the way, put the automation like this, and then I will tend to get it in, let's say based on 8 bars or so, or on 3 bars. Again, syncopated, not like two typical 1 bar, 2 bar thing, like make it 3, 7, 5, whatever. It makes things immediately interesting. So if I use this and cut out the other sound and do the same for the atmospheric one, but instead of going all the way up, I will tend to get this in slightly quicker. So let's see what we can start with. The first thing I notice is that atmospheric track is maybe a little bit too high in frequency already, so maybe I'll put on an additional filter really to get it slowly faded in with a low pass. Bend the curve a little bit, that it's feeling more natural. And then I can start to bring in the first hi-hats. I'm gonna see if I can change a parameter here on the Jupiter that I use as automation. Typical is of course the cut of the frequency things. So let's see if I can bend this in. Just putting in a start and an end point. Another of those typical tools that I made is a bit based on the same principle as the fade out. It's a washout. It's actually used to send at the end of a let's say if you come in a drop, you can use this to kind of put a full reverb on top of things. But I use it sometimes in the opposite way, like I use the fade out in the opposite way as a fade in. So what I can do is do the following. Once you use this, instead of going in an out way, I'm gonna use it in an in way, but in an inverted way, I'm gonna use the full reverb and start to move away the reverb more and more. So this means it will sound like this. It's like something atmospheric is coming in. You have no idea what it is, but eventually it will become a sequence. And as you can see, it's all based on a one knob system, but on this one knob there are plenty of things that are evolving. You have the grain delay. I changed the spray on this, the dry wet slowly. I have the auto filter, which is slowly coming in from a high pass slowly towards the more lower frequencies. You have the dry wet, which is from the beginning very high and slowly getting less now because I'm going down. Again, with the frequencies, I tend to get out the lower ones, otherwise it's too muddy in the low part. Filter delay, same thing, you know, in the beginning you get a lot of delay, and in the end you get almost none. And then of course the compressor to get things at least in the same level, that there are no peaks or stuff like this. But this way you get really like a building tension, and it's as if that constantly things are evolving, but it's because the parameters are so slowly moving, you really have the impression that it's like this. I moved in the hi-hat. In the beginning I mapped this to the LFO. By using the control knob, I can actually change the decay more and more. So if I map the control parameter to an automation, I can slowly start to change this as well. Then I bring in the clap. And as you can see, I'm already 2 minutes far. I'm slowly building things, but it's not getting too boring either, you know, it's because the slow changes makes the tension even more. I just added the parameter for the cutoff. So I'm building towards the right. And then let's say either you make no breaks, either you make short breaks, either you make really long breaks. That's my way of working in production way. I don't want to make too many breaks either. I don't want to make the traditional breaks either, but I'm more tending towards one really big break, really tension building again, and then drop everything, and then it's okay. Because the way I also mix is a bit in the same way. When I do DJ sets, I tend to mix quickly, so I don't need to have too many breaks because it will mess up the way I mix things. So let's go back to the part where I started to bring in the clap, and I think at something like 97 I will start to get things out. I also made a default high pass filter, which I use in combination with a button, a key press in Ableton that I map both on the kick and on the bass, because it will give me the feeling that I'm building a tension thing, and I can quickly swap those. So we'll put another one here. And this way I can automate it as well very easily. Okay. And like I said, I tend to use then a bigger drop, remove literally everything that can have influence to keep away the attention on the main part, so which are the sounds or the parts or whatever you use. So this is for me my main break. So what I really need now is something that will bring in tension more and more. You can use this in different ways. I'm gonna use, in this case, I'm gonna use just a typical reverb. But again, it's a reverb based on Valhalla, vintage reverb, where I cut out the low already. It's a rack that I made. It's nothing more again than based on the same rack that I used for the insert centering. But because I can both influence the send and the return, I can literally do something like a big drop. So let's go back to the beginning of the... Okay. I'm gonna add one more of those washout things that I used before here on the sequential random thing, because I wanna get it up. I want to drop the sound as well. Okay. One more thing that I'm gonna do is, by listening to the track and the arrangement, I hear that the main sound, which is a Jupiter, is not really powerful enough to cut through the mix. So I'm gonna use something which I learned to use by following a workshop with Luca Petrolesi. It's a really cool guy. He really has some unique ways of doing mixing and mastering. And they built together with a company called Acoustica. They built two plugins which are called Diamond and Lift. And the Diamond one is a plugin that can really bring out so nice EQ in an EQ way. It's a kind of combination between a saturation and EQ plugin. But as you can hear, immediately it stands out much more. It has some low cut things which are handy to use. I use this in combination with the other one, Lift. Lift I put in the end of the chain. Why? Because it also has a limiter on top of this. The Lift plugin has actually four things inside. It has a saturation, it has an EQ, it has a compressor, and it has a limiter, kind of clipper. But by using this in a clever way, you can bring out sounds and immediately also bring them to their really max level if you want. I will do an A/B later on that you can really hear the difference. put them together. So if you solo this one, the difference is huge. And it's not only about volume, but it's really about the character that the sound gets, so it will cut through the mix much better. So I can lower even now. I'm gonna do the same with the sequential one. Heavy plugins, I have to say. Okay. One other trick that you can use is at the end of when you use the clap, you can use it also at the end of the drop to really accentuate the drop. So again, let's use this Valhalla thing. Let's zoom in on the last one. Okay. And like I said, either I use one break and then I start to slow down, build it down again. Either I use one smaller break after the big one. But now I tend to bring in the elements in an opposite way. In the beginning I used the closed hi-hat open, then the ride. And I'm gonna use it in a different way. This way you get a different feel of the track. What I can also do is, instead of bringing the traditional frequency up from the sound in here, I can use the pen tool within Ableton and from time to time do additional boosts. This way the delays will start to work and give more accents to things. So let's go. Make it a little bit longer because I'm gonna go down from 177. So let's make another small break here, not too big, not too fancy. And then remove. All the things that are not necessary. And then I'm gonna use the same way I came in with the fades and stuff. I'm gonna fade out everything again, so I get a nice way of building and removing things. one more filter here with the washout that I can remove the highs here more. That's it. After my production stage and let's say kind of pre-mixing stage, as you saw, I put some things up, lifting with saturation or other plugins. Then I tend to go with the bounced stems, and really all stems are bounced. I tend to go to Studio One and I use a template which is based on some predefined groups, which is a kick, a low percussion, a high percussion, a drum bass, which is actually a combination of those three. Then you have the bass, then you have the synth low. What is synth low? It's all the pads and strings and all the longer sounding things. Then synth high is all the stepped ones, like sequenced ones. Then you have FX ones, then two vocals, and then eventually everything goes to a stereo bass. And this stereo bass then goes to my master bass. That's in a big nutshell, let's say, is my template that I use. So first thing what I do is I just bounce the stems here. This is the one I don't need. The scaler doesn't contain anything. So I will be importing these ones. That's it. First thing is I'm gonna map them and reorganize them a bit visually as well, that I know what is what. So the first one that I always put is the kick. Then I put in the higher ones. Why? Because it's following also the same structure as my groups. It's easier visually to follow. Then after the high ones you have the percussion ones. Low percussion is all claps, snares, low toms, high toms, whatever you have. Then the sounds, and then the atmospheric tracks or the FX or things like this. So once I have this, I will start routing them to the corresponding predefined groups. So kick is kick. Then the two hi-hats on the right is the high percussion. Then the clap and the percussion, the mid, the toms actually, is the low percussion. Then bass is bass, of course. We had two sequence sounds, so there is not really a part in between or a string or something, so I put this on synth high. And then the lower one I put on synth low, which is actually atmospheric, could be on an FX as well. So this is basically what I have. Now, first thing what I do is everything is routed within the predefined groups to the stereo bus. I always tend to bring out the mid of the sound of the complete track of the stereo bus up. Why? This is the character of your sound. So how do I do this? I use this with FabFilter Pro C2 in a way that I use the sidechain system from them, and I actually sidechain everything or filter all what is low and all what is high. I also use a load shelf to really cut out even the low mids. Why? Because if I tend to listen here, what I'm actually compressing, it's no high, no low, it's really only the mid sound that I'm compressing. I tend to compress in between -2 to -3 dB, depending on of course, what you get in. And then I check if I need to change the volume. It's based on auto gain, but the auto gain in a FabFilter C2 is an auto gain. Once it's activated, it's a percentage based on this. So I will be using this as a percentage and try to bring it as close as possible to the input signal. So this is okay, maybe a little less. So for me this is enough. If I bypass this now, actually you will not hear a lot of difference, but I actually boosted the mid sound. But the only thing you will notice is it's as if the kick and the bass gets much more space if you put it on. So it gets much more accentuated. Next to this I use the Klangheim compressor with a name I don't even want to pronounce. It's a very cheap compressor. Actually, I think it's about $20 or $30, but it's for me the best techno compressor that you can have, really. The way I use this is, as you can see, I have a default setting where the release is all the way up. The attack is all the way down, which is actually the worst way to put a compressor in the beginning, but I tend to do this that I can really hear the differences. What I do as first is I remove the bass, because the bass line is always getting too much thing of the compressor in. So what I'm really aiming for is the bouncing of the drums and the sounds in between. So let's go back there, where you have some more elements. Ratios 4:1. And now I'm gonna bring up the, sorry, I have to activate it first. I'm gonna bring up the compression that it's really hard, like -5, -6, -7. And then I go back with the release until I find it bouncing back. Now it's bouncing. Then I bring up the attack, because I just, by putting it so fast, the attack, I lose all the transients. So now I'm gonna bring back the transients and the kick until I feel or hear that it's okay. Once I have this, I put back the bass line. And then I'm gonna do the same a little bit like with the FOB filter. I'm gonna filter out the low for the compressor, that it doesn't interfere too much. And you hear immediately that it gets much more space. And then I bring up a little bit more the compression, that it really bounces in between 0 and -1 dB. But it will really bring life back to the dynamics of your track. But still, techno tends to be really compressed thing as well. So this is the way to do it. Once I did this process, what I'm really interested in is I want to have the same gain as before. So without the compressor, I'm actually a little bit too high even. So I'm gonna lower down all the stems a little bit, that I'm approximately at 0 dB in a mastering setting based on a K12 system. Okay, let's go back to the compressor. So without this, I'm there. If I put it on, I will be lower. So I will make up the gain until I'm back at the original part. But this way I have a controlled elements thing in a compressed way, and it's still a little bit bouncing. Then, next thing I use is the Ozone 8 equalizer. Why? Because they have a system which is called matching. You can match it either to a reference thing, a reference track you really like, but why I use this with the pink noise thing. So when I activate, I can immediately see in a more average way, because I changed the spectrum options that it's slower. So in a more average way, where do I need to maybe boost or cut a little bit in a general way to get a more common, or how you call this, transparent way of sounding with the track. So if you see the red line here is the pink noise line, and your line, the line of the track is following almost the same. It doesn't need to be exactly the same, but then at least you know that not something is speaking or too low. Or next thing I use is the Melda Productions M Autodynamic. It's an autodynamic cue. Why do I use this? Because of the fact that I already used 2 compressors. I maybe really took a little bit too much of the dynamics as well, especially in the low and in the high. So what I do use this for is in the low, I will find where my kick is standing and I will kind of let it bounce again a little bit more. And maybe I do the same for the highs, depending if I really tend to hear it's necessary. So that's it. Then I use again the same plugin I used before. It's the Acoustica Lift. Why? Just to lift out a little bit more the high end, because I really like the high end lift on this one. And then at the end I use the SPL Vitalizer. Why? Because I really like the stereo expansion on this. It's bright, it's clean, and it's really like making your track a little bit more wide. But as you can see, in the end, even after putting so many things on the stereo bus, it's not more than 1 dB that it's more. So it's not that I boost it a lot in volume. But for me, this is the way I make a pre-master. And I know a lot of master engineers will probably don't like the fact that I put in compressors, but I really need it, because this is for me my character of my sound. So that's it. And then next to this, I start to process all the individual stems or elements, or maybe their groups towards what is necessary. So first things first, the kick. As for me, it doesn't need any more processing because it was already a pre-processed kick. Then I put some more processing in Ableton, so that I'm not gonna change anything there. It's okay like it is. For the higher percussions, which are routed to this one, I'm gonna put on an isotope alloy. Why? Because I use a transient thing to kind of cut out more the sustain and give it maybe sometimes a little bit more attack. Because those things can really, they shine more if they have more transients. For the clap and the percussion, I do actually the same, but I really lower down the sustain because I don't want to have it too much sustained sound and taking in everything from the sounds or the lower part. But I really boost in here the transients, because a clap and a snare and all those things, they have to be snappy, they have to be, you know, cutting through. And on top of this, I use the limiter from Alloy. It's a shit limiter, it's really a shit limiter, but for all those things like lower percussions, it's fantastic. If you listen to the difference, this is without the limiter, and this is where it really cuts through. And how do I use it? In a soft mode, I really get everything down and then I boost slowly, but every transient is really boosted in a good way. You can also see it in a graphical way. It really will cut it out, but boost it straight away again. So. Then the bass line, sometimes I put in side chaining or other things. What I will do now is I will use the BX Digital just to make the mono better, because I bounced it from a Convolution Pro reverb, etc. So you will probably have some side signals as well there. So I will cut those out, that they're not interfering anymore. And then the sounds, Usually what I do is on the sounds I put on the imager from Ozone, and as you can see it's already going down 0, it's going out of phase. So I'm gonna see if I can solve this. Apparently it's in the low part. So what I will do for the lower part is I will cut it out. I have routed all the sounds to the synth high group, and I use a plugin called Satson. It's an emulation of an older, let's say it's an emulation of a mixing desk combination thing. But it really has some nice filtering. You hear it, it's not too steep, it's a nice curve that it bends. And this way I don't have the problem anymore of the lower part that it will bounce. And now I can make it a little bit wider in the other elements, in the other parts as well. Same counts for the other sound. Cut out the low. I think we're getting close to what I need. Okay, and then in the end, I go to my master bus, and then I will start to activate one by one plugins that I also put in a template, which I always use. Again, I have an imager for the total amount to see if I can boost it a little bit more. And it's still okay, mono. Then I use another beaks just to find some shit frequencies. Like for example this one. Put it mono a little bit more, and then make it even bigger. And then I use a limiter clipper, which is, I think, even for free, or at least it's not expensive at all. But it's one of the most transparent things I ever saw. And I use actually two of them. I use one to cut out really the high transients. So if I put it on, you can see here in red what I will cut out. So I will really cut out only a couple of spiking things. And what I tend to do then is I search for the value that I cut out, which is 3.40. And I will bring back the volume in the opposite way, that it's also 340. So it's just really cutting out the top. That's it. Next to it, again, a meld-up production, where I can do another if it's necessary. It's not always necessary, but again, to bring some more dynamics in low and high. Then another one. And this one is really to boost things, so I will put it down in the beginning. And I will start to boost until I really can start to clip. But since there is no ceiling on, it will not cut them out. It will keep them going, but then at least you have an idea where you're cutting out. And as my final part, what I use is this TDR combination limiter compressor clipper. Why? Because again, it's very transparent. You have an LU meter here, which is the same as this one, but it's software based, and it can give some extra character, especially with the output. You have a drive thing. It's a kind of saturation, overdrive, harmonic distortion thing. As you can see, the values are really low. It's 0.6, 0.8, 0.7, it's almost nothing, but it gives just the extra what you have. That's it. So guys, thanks for joining me on my little journey here in the studio, and I hope to see you guys somewhere else, maybe on the dance floor, maybe in a studio, who knows. So, see you next time.